Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I am very excited for our session today on Words Their Way. I wanted to introduce our presenter. Her name is Siobhan Murphy. She is the Planning and Implementation Manager for Literacy for Pearson Canada. She has been in the field of education for 20 years, including teaching at the elementary and junior high levels as a district lead literacy teacher and on a second amendment at the Edmonton Regional Learning Consortium as a literacy consultant. Siobhan is passionate about all things literacy. She completed her master's degree in education at the University of Alberta, focusing her research on assessment for learning in elementary writing. We also have Crystal Dahl joining us. She has been the Pearson Account Executive for all Alberta school districts and a former educator of 20 plus years. Crystal is happy to be supporting Calgary Catholic School Division educators and answering any questions you may have about the Pearson resources in the chat during today's session. Just a friendly reminder to please have your cameras off and your mics muted during this session. And without further ado, Siobhan, I'll let you take it over.
Crystal, do you want to say anything before we get going, or do you want me to just jump right in?
Just thank you so much for having us, Calgary Catholic, and we're excited to be bringing you some information today on Words Their Way. So over to you, Siobhan, and thanks so much, Kim, for the lovely introduction.
Yes, thanks for the introduction. Thanks for having us. Before we get going, I actually just want to take a minute to share. Oops. I don't know if I just stopped sharing. Let me try that again. I think I might have clicked the wrong button. Hopefully you can see my screen. I just wanted to share Pearson Canada's National Land Acknowledgement as we get started with our time together today. Pearson Canada acknowledges the history of the land on which we all gather. It is a combination of treaty and traditional unceded territory and Métis homeland. We acknowledge the many Inuit, Métis, and First Nations whose footsteps have marked the land where each of you currently resides or are visiting. We also recognize the land as an act of reconciliation and gratitude. Indigenous people's connection to the land teaches us about their inherent responsibility to protect and respect Mother Earth. With this acknowledgement, we honor their relatives who have been buried here, as well as those who live and work here today. Pearson Canada strives for respectful partnerships with all peoples of this country as we search for collective healing and true reconciliation and honor this beautiful land. So globally as a company or nationally as a company at Pearson Canada, we've been really working hard on our Truth and Reconciliation with our Truth and Reconciliation Council and doing some work on, we've just revamped our national land acknowledgement as we've done some of the work. And so we continue to take time to explore what we know and lead us to what we don't know, and we are happy to be learning alongside all of you. So thanks for joining us today. If you have questions as we go through our time together, you can post them in the chat box. Crystal's going to keep an eye on them, and Crystal, feel free to interrupt me when any questions come up, and I'll do my best to answer them or direct you to where you might find the answers. So with that said, we are going to spend our time together today talking about Words Their Way. And I know within your district, the larger image there, the Words Their Way kind of main resource, you have multiple copies within your school that will be available to you. And then also purchased are some of the companion volumes. And those are those smaller kind of books to the right. You'll see 3 of them there. So I'll kind of talk a little bit, most of our time will be focused on the main resource, and then I'll talk a little bit about what's in those companion volumes. But look for those to come to your school soon and be able to access Words Their Way through those print resources. So we'll take some time, like I said, to explore mostly that main resource. I'll kind of capture a little bit what's in those smaller resources, and then we'll wrap up our time. But if you have questions, please post them in the chat. Okay, so Words Their Way, just to kind of give you a little bit of background here, is an opportunity for students to analyze words, to discover similarities and differences. They also get a chance to look at the spelling patterns and really apply what they're learning to similar words. So it's different. You'll see that we talk a little bit about, spelling within here and maybe doing some assessments that way, but it's not, our traditional spelling lists where we've given students, 10 or 20 words to memorize for Friday's test, and they may not be related to one another. And the students, my own students even, would remember them for the Friday test, but when it would come to Monday, would forget how to spell those words. And so Words Their Way really gives students an opportunity to transfer their learning into other contexts, and just like they would be able to spell similar words using the patterns that they've been working on. So it's a really great way for them to apply what they've learned, and for you as the teacher then to observe if they can transfer that learning to similar words as they're working with them in their writing and their reading. Investigation is a big piece of Words Their Way. So students are really hands-on learning. They're also developing their oral activities as they work through Words Their Way, and really look at new spelling patterns and really make sure that they hold those in their long-term memory. So again, it gets away from that remembering the lists for Friday's test, and then, them not remembering them come Monday. So this is a chance for them to really spend the week working closely with words that follow certain spelling patterns. Students are grouped according to their spelling skills and their areas that they need to work on. So I'll talk about that in just a few minutes as to how that's how you kind of determine where they are and organize them. But this is a really great way for us to differentiate instruction within our classroom, because we know that not all students are at the same part in their learning. And, they're in a different part of the continuum, and we really want to make sure that we support them where they're at and then move them forward as learners. So this is a great way to be able to do that, because we can do some initial assessments to find out where they are at, and then we can group students accordingly. If some of our students need more targeted support, this can help identify that too, and we can group those students in that way as well. So lots of key pieces. As Words Their Way is in action, you will notice that students are going to be doing sorting of, could be pictures with our early learners, but usually for most of the students in most of the developmental levels, they'll be working with words, and they'll be sorting them according to the spelling pattern. And then, of course, our hope is that these students are then applying what they're learning into what they're doing every day in the classroom in their everyday writing, for example. So they're able to apply that understanding and that knowledge into their writing. It also helps them to really notice spelling patterns in reading and through vocabulary practice. And then as teachers, we are administering weekly assessments to monitor student learning and really to inform next steps in instruction. So it's really about having that data collection weekly, so we can decide maybe there's something we need to revisit. Some students might require a little bit of extra support, or are they ready to move on to the following week's lessons? So that's really a key piece too, being able to check in with them weekly. I mean, obviously on a daily basis, we have our ongoing observations and anecdotal evidence that we're collecting, but towards the end of the week, we can do more of a formal assessment and see where they're at, and really guide next steps. Okay. Oops. Get to the next slide. There we go. So what's inside this main book? So this is the one that you're going to start with and primarily work out of until you identify what developmental stages the students that you're in your class are at. There's lots of great information here. It is a larger book. I mean, it's a couple hundred pages for sure, but there's tons of great information in here. So I'm kind of going to break it down into what's inside the book. And then when you get your copy, you'll be able to kind of navigate where you need to go. The first kind of couple chapters is really background on word study for phonics, vocabulary, and spelling instruction. So there's some kind of research shared in there, and just some background information that you might want for your own learning. So I highly suggest taking a look at that. And then, of course, it walks you through the inventories that are included, and I will show you a sample of what those look like and talk a little bit more about them in just a couple of slides. But that's where you're going to find the inventory. So it's going to be in the appendix, the actual copies of the actual assessment that you're going to use with students, but it will talk you through how they're organized and which one you might select within the first couple of chapters inside the Words Their Way book. Now, the other thing that it does is, and that's a really key chapter that you're going to want to make sure you visit, is chapter 3. So chapter 3 is really designed around the word study principles and practices that you're going to be utilizing on an ongoing basis. And so that's really critical because it breaks down all the types of sorts that students are going to be working through. Now, for students who have worked with Words Their Way before, they're going to be familiar with the sorts. But for students that are new to it, you're going to have to take some time to, and if you're new to it as a teacher, make sure you understand the types of sorts that they're going to be engaging in that are suggested in the lesson. And then, once they work with them a couple of times, then, when you say you're going to do a blind sort, then the students just come to know what that is because they've had lots of opportunities to work with it and practice with it. There is a really good page suggested in chapter 3. It's on page 59, and it really talks about the continuum of support for word study. And basically just for students who might be novice or new to using Words Their Way, it kind of talks about the importance of like the teacher doing a lot of that modeling. So at the beginning, you might start with one set of word cards, and the teachers really, using a pocket chart and really modeling how they're going to organize the words. The students can still be involved in the organization of it, but it's that opportunity for them to model it. And then you can introduce, what sort it is that you're going to use with the students. So initially they are going to need some practice with that. And of course it's going to need to be teacher supported and teacher directed off the beginning so that students get to understand how that works. If students have worked with Words Their Way before, then, they're going to be more experienced sorters. And so, when you say conduct a closed sort or an open sort, they're going to know what that means. They're going to be able to read through their lists and do the sorts themselves. And we hope that, all students are able to do that once they've had practice with it. So even if they are new to Words Their Way, once they get the hang of those different types of sorts and how to sort, and then that will transfer over to them, and they will be able then to work through those sorts with less teacher directed or less teacher supported as they move through the week, or move through the lessons, I should say. After chapter 3, then it actually spends a chapter following that on each of the 5 stages of development. And I know I have a slide coming up that outlines the 5 different stages. So each there's one chapter for each of those 5 stages, which again is really helpful. So if there's 2 or 3 stages that seem to be the ones that you're working on within your classroom, make sure you take a read through those couple of chapters that apply to you and that you're familiar with those stages of development. And then chapter 9, so towards the end, after they've taken some time to go through the 5 stages of development, is actually around schedules, routines, and materials for effective practices. So you're going to want to take a look at that. So if you're thinking of like, what does this look like? I'll share kind of like a sample schedule of what it could look like. But if you want to see some other samples that are available, check out chapter 9, because that's where you're going to find that information. And you can kind of think of how your classroom's organized and what kind of schedule is going to work best for you. And then as well as the routines and things like that, because those are important to have in place, especially at the beginning of the school year, so that as students work on their word sorts, they come to know those routines and be able to apply them, and things run a little bit more smoothly. So take some time to check out chapter 9 as well. Okay, so where to start? So if you're new to using Words Their Way, you're going to have to select a spelling inventory based on the grade level or in the student's achievement. What you're going to do then is you're going to administer the inventory to the whole class, kind of like how you would do a traditional spelling test. The students don't get to study the words in advance though, so make sure that you don't. You want to be able to see what they can do just without having practiced or looked at those words in advance. And then what you're going to do then is you actually analyze using, there's a features guide depending on which assessment that you're using. And on the next slide coming up, it'll show you which ones are available. And then that's really going to show you what students already know and their approximate stage of where they're going to begin. So of those 5 stages, where is a good place for them to start? And then what you can do is you can organize your classroom based off of the information and the data that you've collected, and organize your groups that way. A couple of things here is that aside from the inventories that you're doing with students, you can also use those weekly assessments and writing samples and reading observations to help you inform instruction, but also to help if students need to move to a different stage. So remember that the spelling stages are fluid, and students can move ahead at different paces. So you may have a student that's ready to move on to the next stage of development. And of course, these screenings are used, or these tools, these inventories are used to as a screening, and obviously you can use them to monitor where students are at, but not really necessarily for grading purposes. So you can use them a couple of times a year is the suggestions. You can monitor their progress. Okay, so this is, again, I know it's hard to see because I can only get so much on the screen there, but the spelling inventories, they are quick and easy to administer and score. And again, lets you know what students already know about words. And then, of course, here are the spelling inventories that are available. So you have access to all three of these that are listed kind of in that bottom chart there. You'll see the grade ranges suggested there. And then what developmental range that they fall within. So again, you're going to want to look through that main resource book and then decide, essentially you're going to say the word, you read out a sentence with the word in it, and the students record it on their form. And then you kind of can walk around as students are, writing the words down. You can stop students if you feel like they've gotten a handful in a row wrong. You may just have them all students attempt all of the words. So again, up to you how you want to do that, and how you want to manage that. But oftentimes we just have all students, attempt all the words, unless you see that they're getting quite frustrated. Then you may decide to have that student stop early if they're struggling with it. So there's your options. Now the actual, as I think I already mentioned this, but the actual inventories and the sheets and materials that you'll need are found in the appendix of that main book. That's where you're going to find it. Here are the 5 stages of development. So you'll see them on there. And so again, there's companion volumes for all 5 stages, but I believe your school board has purchased 3 of those stages. So, and in those companion volumes, which I'll talk to in a few minutes, they have the detailed lessons in them. But there you will see all of the 5 developmental stages. Now, this is actually referenced with a description of each of the stages in the main book. Also, when you open the book, inside the front cover, it outlines the stages of spelling. So these 5 stages. Do your students spell this way? And it kind of shows some examples of each of the 5 stages. So that's a really helpful inside the front cover. And then there's some instructions, regarding that stage. So take a peek at that. It's inside the front cover of the main book. And then of course you can go to the chapters that are about each of those developmental stages that are provided in the book, and that will provide you with a lot of information. Unfortunately, today we don't have time to dive too deep into each of the 5 stages. So as you've done the assessment, you've found out where your students are at, you've grouped them. I will say that so within those 5 developmental stages, you ideally in your classroom want to have no more than 3 groups, just to keep things manageable. So as you think of those 5 stages that were on the previous slide, and organizing your schedule for how Words Their Way is going to happen and look in your classroom, just keep that in mind. Try to, if you can, stick to having just 3 groupings. So if I go back a slide, like maybe you have stage 2, 3, and 4 within your class, you may have to make some concessions. You may have to group some students in groups that might be kind of outliers. And again, it talks about that in the book. So it's just, if you have too many groups running, it's really hard to support the learning that's happening in each of the groups. It also makes it a little bit of a challenge then to do the assessment at the end of the week, when you have to kind of do 5 different groups of assessments. So here, this is just a sample weekly schedule. Again, take a peek at chapter 9. It walks through many sample schedules that you can look at. But here essentially is what the students are doing. So you're introducing the sort on day 1 and discussing the features. Then the students are going to do some sorting that day. Then you're going to repeat the sort. They're going to check. They're going to write the sort in their word study notebook. They may engage in something like a speed sort on day 2. Essentially, they're timing themselves on the sort, and then they can redo that towards the end of the week and see if they've improved their time. They're doing seat work and partner work throughout the week, so they can be doing things like blind sorts, writing sorts. If those things sound unfamiliar to you, if you're new to using Words Their Way, Again, you're going to want to look in chapter 3 because it explains all the types of sorts that students will be engaging in. And then, of course, there's some extension activities that they can do inside their word study notebook. Day 4, they're going to repeat the sort. They might be doing a word hunt in familiar text. So that's where they take a book and they see if they can find some of the words that they've been working on in familiar text that they've been reading. You may engage them in a second speed sort. And then to wrap up the week is where we engage in the assessment and games. And so we can see if they're able to apply the skills that they've learned from that week's words to on the assessment that we're doing. And again, we can use that information to inform our next steps. There's also games there as well, and you'll have all the access to the game boards that you'll need in the templates. The games can continue into the next week as seed or center activities. So it's a great way for students to continue their learning as they move forward, and a great way for you then to have a word study center set up easily where they can access some of the work that they've done in the previous week. Homework. So throughout the week, students can be doing the sorts. They can bring the sorts home. And then that way it's also a way for them to practice for their assessment that comes towards the end of the week. I know my daughter does Words Their Way in her school, and so she brings her sorts home towards the end of the week, and we practice before her assessment on, typically on a Friday. And they have, word study notebooks where they glue the sorts in as well. So they do that right on the 4th day when she's for homework, and then they're ready to go when they do their assessment on the 5th day. But there's some of those management pieces too that you're going to want to think about as you go through this, or if you have some colleagues that have used Words Their Way, things like, they might want to put their initials on the back of the word cards, or you may have word cards kind of everywhere, baggies, things like that. So if you have any colleagues in your building that have used Words Their Way, there's lots of kind of tips and tricks that they might be able to share with you. Again, just given our time together today, we don't have enough time to dive too deep into it. So it's just more of an overview of what's inside the resources that you have access to. So that brings us to the companion volumes. These are much shorter books, and they're really designed around those 5 developmental stages. So there's one companion volume for each of the 5 stages. These are the 3 that I believe Calgary Catholic has purchased. And so inside of these companion volumes, what you will find are clearly stated generalizations for each lesson. So that will be in there. What are the students working on? And then it provides step-by-step directions for each sort. And it's also in these new editions, they expanded it to encourage active thinking with questions to guide reflection and generalizing. The reproducible sorts are found in there so that you can get the word cards that you need for the students. And usually they're the ones in charge of cutting them apart when they get them at the beginning of the week. So you can just give them the page that would look something like this, and then they can do the cutting and the sorting from there. One of the other things that's in these companion volumes also is a pacing chart. Wasn't in previous editions, it's now in these new companion volume editions, and a goal setting form. And so these provide just some guidelines for placing students in the lesson progression, suggestions also too for modifying the progression of sorts, and tools to monitor their progress through each unit. So check those out. Those are all kind of key pieces that are inside of the companion volume. And so that's where you're going to get your lessons that you're doing week to week. While there is some suggestions of that inside the main resource about some of the activities that take place, the detailed lessons and the step-by-step instructions are actually found in the companion volume. So you're going to want to make sure that you have access to these as well. Okay, so just kind of as we're wrapping up our time together today, one of the reasons, or I shouldn't say one, many of the reasons why you might want to use Words Their Way, there's lots of them. I've just captured a few on the screen here. But as we think about the different areas like spelling, writing, and reading, it does, and I've mentioned this at the start, really give us an opportunity to differentiate the spelling word lists for students' needs and to really match the learners where they're at in their learning. And that's why it's key to do that inventory right off the get-go so that we can find out that information. Also, as you can see, the students are in that sample schedule I shared, they're doing a lot of hands-on learning. And so they get to work with sounds, patterns, and meanings in a hands-on way throughout the week, multiple times throughout the week. So we don't just, talk about the words on Monday and then wrap it up on Friday. Every day they're spending a little bit of time working hands-on with the word sounds, the patterns, and the meaning. The other thing that some of the other benefits in regards to writing is it often we see improved spelling in writing. So they start to think about when they're going to even spell an unfamiliar word, they think of a familiar word that they know and the pattern that they know to help them spell unfamiliar words, which and that's also some of the support we can provide to them. So we can say, if they ask for help with spelling a word, we might say, this word as part of the words that we've been working on. Think of a spelling pattern that to help you spell the word that they're looking to spell. It also helps with high frequency word mastery. For reading, improve decoding and reading, and they start to notice those patterns, and of course, improved vocabulary comprehension. So these are just a few of the benefits of working with Words Their Way, but it certainly is a great resource for you to be able to really meet those students where they're at and really drive that instruction forward and help them benefit from all aspects of literacy by using Words Their Way. So that's kind of wraps up our time together today. I know we only have a couple minutes left. So if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to stay on, but you'll be getting your resources. If they haven't arrived at your school, they'll be coming very soon. So look out for them and enjoy the startup of your school year. Good luck and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for your time today. Take care.
Thank you so much, Siobhan, for sharing your knowledge. I know I used Words Their Way in my classroom and I absolutely loved it. And so we will keep the chat open for a little bit longer for any questions, but otherwise, I hope all the teachers have a wonderful startup. I know tomorrow's your first day of school, so I know you guys are going to do awesome.
So far, just lots of thank yous in the chat, Siobhan. There was a question about where the assessment can be found, and I said that it's in the companion volumes, and that was about the only question we had today.
So there's a question from Karen, and she says, can this resource be used for grade 4?
Yes, absolutely. It can be used for grade 4. So it can be used all the way up the grades and starting, with our early learners all the way up. It's a great match too, as we look towards the new curriculum coming in grades 4, 5, and 6. Just because there is a really heavy focus on obviously, the phonics piece, but the vocabulary piece as well and spelling instruction. So certainly you can use it with grade 4s. And you, again, when you look at the assessment inventories, that are found in the Words Their Way, the large book, you can decide from there which inventory would best apply to the grade level that you're teaching. So there's three to select from, but certainly it would work well in grade 4.
Thanks, Siobhan. And one more question from Sylvana. How long is each session within the group? Or each session with the group, sorry.
Well, initially, depending on how new they are to Words Their Way, it might take a little bit longer because the teacher's going to have to, direct some of the sorting and do some modeling in that piece. But as you get going, you're really only spending a couple of minutes introducing the words at the sort at the beginning of the week. And then, of course, you can meet with the groups and touch base with them daily, but would only be for a couple of minutes. So I would highly suggest there's some schedules that you might want to take a peek at in Chapter 9. And there's a few different ones in there. So I would highly suggest taking a look at that. You might meet with some groups longer than other groups, just depending on their needs and the types of support that they'll require.
Thanks, Siobhan. And we got a couple more in here. Catherine asked about, is the school district purchasing the main resource or just the 3 companion volumes? I've answered that in the chat. It's actually all 4 books will be coming to you. So the main resource as well as the 3 companion volumes that Siobhan was sharing. Then there's another question. What other resources can you use to correlate the writing aspect? Any suggestions on that, Siobhan?
Well, I think any writing program or resource that you're using, because it's really about them applying their knowledge from Words Their Way. So I don't know that there's one that completely correlates to it as per se, but I would say that, you know, we're really looking at the transfer of the understanding from what they're doing in Words Their Way, applying to their everyday writing.
Thank you. And then there's another question here from Chanel. She's asking, do the words in Words Their Way match the high frequency words for each grade from the new curriculum?
I believe they will match, because I think the new curriculum ones are like, you know, the high frequency or like a Dolce or a Fry. You know, most of those ones are fairly common. And so yet you'll notice that in many of the resources that's kind of the high frequency word list that they're using. So you should be able to see. I don't have the exact correlation done, so unfortunately I can't say 100%, but based off those kind of high frequency word lists, you should see certainly that it meshes nicely together.
Thanks, Siobhan. Sorry if you can hear my little one in the background. He's home starting school tomorrow.
Fun. Mine started today.
Yeah, it's such an exciting time for the kids. Just some more thank yous and lots of excitement for using the resource. And just want to spend a minute saying thank you to Kimberly for setting this up and for inviting us. And we really appreciate the opportunity to help your teachers get underway and see what's coming for them. I think they'll be in good hands going forward. So I'm excited for you.
Yes, we are really, really excited to get this into the schools and get it going. So
I'll continue to keep checking with customer service on it, but we're just waiting for the restock. So as soon as that comes, it's usually a quick turnaround time to get out to us here in Alberta. All right, I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat, Siobhan. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today, Siobhan. And please reach out, Kim, if there's anything we can do.
well, thank you so much for both of you coming, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too. Take care.
Thank you.